Good evening. This is Dale Lamb, Gardner Webb University. This is Mels 603 fall of 16. I've got about 602. I know that I'm going an hour early this week, so I'm not sure anybody will be able to join me. I have a meeting later tonight, so I'll go ahead and just dive right in and try not to take too long tonight. A couple of questions that students had this week. Make sure you understand you will do one component review of the 10. Of the 10 components submitted this semester, you do one written review of all 10 of those, one of each one. That would be 10. Then you do 2 peer reviews using Zoom this semester. And if you don't know how to use Zoom, if you look at the bottom of my course overview page in Blackboard, I have the new Mels handbook, which has the Zoom directions in there and how to upload to YouTube, and then send me the link so that I can view it. Or you can put the link in discussion board. I have students do that. That's good. I have your groups right here for your 2 Zoom sessions. The first person in the list is the Zoom master or the leader that gets in touch with the others. Student information is down here at the bottom in terms of how to get in touch with your colleagues. The one down here at the bottom. So if you have any questions, but again, you have to do one written of each of the 10 components, and then you do Zoom sessions on the final, the skip, and the OMA. You do Zoom session on those. If you don't remember that, it's right here on the front on our first page on course overview. It's right here. All right. And you can send them to me, or you can put them in discussion board, or you just send us the link is what we want. You can't upload the video in Blackboard, but you can upload the link, and that's the way you do that. But that link would have to be back to YouTube. All right. Another question I had this week on discussion boards. We'll go to discussion board. I intentionally left a few in here. I see that I've got some discussion boards that need to be graded. When you get down, I had somebody who said there's not a place to put some things. When you get down to the end of the discussion board place, if you'll notice, there's 2 pages. If you'll just click on the button and go to the second page, you'll find the additional drop boxes for other components. They're on the second page. So remember, it's a 2-pager. All right, now, I want to again make you aware of some of the materials that I have for you in Blackboard under Task Stream Tools. Under Task Stream Tools, I have templates. There'll be a template in there for the skip and one for the OMA. There's all of them there. But those are used to put together that final comprehensive submission in Task Stream. As you know, in Task Stream, on your work page, you have all the 6 evidences come first: APSEL, APTEL, etc. And they have component A, B, C, D, and E. And then there's a box right past E that just says APSEL or APTEL. There's one that just says skip and one OMA. When you click on that, that's where you upload the final evidence narrative that has all 5 components of that particular evidence in it, all put together in one document as if you wrote it as one document. There's also a button there that says complete form. You click on it, and that's where you put your summary and descriptors. Summary is a summary of the evidence. Remember, this is the one that the state sees. This is the final one that has the comprehensive. They don't see the parts, they only see this last one. And so you have to write a summary. That summary, write it in Word, copy and paste it into Task Stream like you always do. You can use that summary as the abstract for your final evidence narrative, because that paper calls for an abstract at the front, which is a summary. So don't do double duty. Also on Task Stream Tools, I have a guide to help you writing those summaries and descriptors. Remember, you don't do summary and descriptors for each of the components of an evidence, like APSEL, OMA, skip. You do it for the final evidence submission. There's a button that says complete form. And if you still can't catch on to what they should look like, I have an example of what accomplished level summary and descriptors that are submitted with the final evidence narrative should look like. Let me see if I can quickly. Not really lot of quickness. I can't preload task stream. It always times out on me if I try to do that when I do other things. So let me get in now and see if I can go fairly quickly. And yes, I'm hoping that you folks can see. Now, this is an older one. It's mine. I created the student one years ago for me to use for teaching sessions. This is like your work page in TaskStream. I hope everybody can see this. Instead of saying part A, it just says component A now. It's the same thing. But you'll notice down at the bottom, there's one that doesn't have just that one. That's where the complete form button is, where you submit your summary and descriptors. You also upload your final document, just like you would anytime. And then you put your summary and descriptors here. When you click on that button, it's going to be a 3-part summary. Brief reflection, impact evaluation. There'll be 3 boxes, and then your descriptors. And then again, I have given you a document, save and return. Let me get out of here before this thing. Get out of that. It doesn't really like Blackboard. It'll crash on me. So that is the place that you put your summary and descriptors. And again, I have a document here to help you with that, how to write your summary and descriptors, and an example of what it should look like. I also have examples of what those final evidence narratives should look like. I have them categorized as elementary, middle, and high school. That's the final document that has all components in it. Here's an example of what they should look like. Here's a template that you can use to make them look like that. So all these items are under TaskStream tools. So hopefully you will have some help putting those together, and that you should be able to put your 2 final narratives together, your skip and your OMA. All right. We're on Zoom session 5 this week. All I had this week was incident reporting and the code of conduct, and this kind of concludes this section. Let's see, next week we're going to do violence in schools and conference presentation. So I really can do all of that. So I just want to introduce you to those tonight, and so I'll talk to you about those. CMS incident reporting. This is a document I had created in 2009 when I still worked in the central office in CMS. And that's when Power School, right before it became known as Power School, it was NC Wise for years. Some of you older folks will remember that. So SIMS became NC Wise, became Power School. And so I had this manual done. It's a how-to manual on how to enter data in, the technical part of it. I had trainers at that time who, when we got new people into the district or people newly promoted into administrative roles, we trained them how to actually physically put the data in. Once the budget crisis hit after 2008, I didn't have the trainers anymore, didn't have money. So I had them, the last thing I had them do was create this document so that I could train. Rather than spending a whole week over at staff development, I could do it in 3 hours with this document, because I would send it to the new people and make them read this before we got started. But the whole idea, and it costs a lot of money to build this thing. I think my name's on here somewhere. It costs a lot of money to build this. That's Pam's the one that did it, her and Cynthia, and then me. I'm the one that paid for it, so my name's on there somewhere. But anyway, the whole notion here is this is real. Entering data is important. But unfortunately, there was a time when we had money, it was so important we pulled you out for a week and trained you. But then when the money got tight, We couldn't afford to do that. Couldn't afford to pay the trainers. We couldn't pay substitutes for people, and so or we couldn't cover that much. And you don't have to get substitutes for administrators, but cover that much. So we started doing 3-hour training with me, and I would do it individually. Now, that didn't mean that it was any less important or that you would lose your job any slower if you didn't do these things and if you got it wrong. But sometimes in the school business, the degree of seriousness and importance is not conveyed to new people by the amount of time and money spent on the training for whatever that is. And this is one of those examples. But somewhere in your district, somebody will train you to do this. You have to ask them. In CMS, we would track them down, and I would go and do it. But in the smaller districts, you may have to, but you need to know what you don't know. You need to know, hey, I know how to work Power School from the teacher side, but I don't know how to do it from the administrative side. I better go and get trained. You're only new till lunchtime the first day. After that, you're either part of the problem or part of the solution. And you can't say, well, in September, well, I hadn't got that data put in yet because I'm new. No, you were new the first day, and you should have gotten trained within that first week to put that data in, because the state's very clear. Acts of crime and violence have to be entered into the database within 24 hours. All other acts have to be entered in within 48 hours. You don't have a month to learn. You've got 2 days. And so you need to find the person responsible or the person on your campus that can give you this training. You need to find out if your district has invested the money to make a training manual on. You can see the screens right here. Has somebody done that so that you can learn how to do that quickly? Is there a training in your district? If not, who is the person to go and see? Does your district have a manual? Remember, Power School is not intuitive. I know that you know how to operate the teacher side of it, but the administrative side is completely different. A lot more involved. It's not menu driven. So you need to make sure that you find out, how do I get trained to do the technical part of disciplinary data entry? Not what to enter, but how to enter it. Last week I talked to you about what to enter, and that we report incidents and not outcomes, and the ethics of reporting and all those things. This week it's about, how do you do that? How do you manipulate that so that it's actually in there correctly? That training, there's manuals, there are people. You got to find them, even if they don't find you. So that's the first thing I wanted to cover tonight. The second thing is the code of conduct. Every district has their own code of conduct. It works under the umbrella of the state General Assembly, the North Carolina General Statutes. It works under that umbrella, but every district has a code of conduct. Now, what you need to be careful of is that you know how to manipulate that code of conduct. I'll pull up the one from CMS. I think this one's fairly relevant and fairly new. You better make sure that you know how that works in order to avoid the arbitrary and capricious. Again, arbitrary is when you give one kid a punishment but don't the others, that you're inequitable in your punishment. Capricious is when you give more punishment than the handbook allows. Now, again, this is about the how-to. You need to get with your principal and your administrative team at your school to determine how they interpret the handbook and what systems they have in place. Like, do you automatically, go the middle? Do you automatically go the minimum the first time? Do you automatically go the maximum the first time? How is it that your school and your administrative team, in order to have inter-rater reliability and consistency between you? See, what you don't want is for parents to come in and say, boy, and start shopping administrators, because they know that, Mr. Jones gives a day for this, but Mr. Wells gives 5 days for this. You don't want the line to be at Mr. Jones's door. You don't want students and parents to be shopping administrators to see who they ought to be processing the discipline. So you need to make sure that let me switch over here. All right, I think it was just about to pop up there. Let's see if we can get it to pop up from this one. You need to make sure that you completely, there it goes, that you completely understand the handbook and some of the concepts in the handbook. For example, and this is the one I want us to make sure that we see here. I mean, following this is following due process, and it talks about, you know, extenuating circumstances and things like that. And it has all these other things in there. And it talks about the tier system, the pledge, but there's one particular thing in here. There's a letter from the superintendent that I want to point out. Here's your rights and responsibilities. You need to make sure you know those. Safe harbor provision. That's one of those things that I want to make sure that you know, that there is such a thing as a state safe harbor provision. A kid that finds something that he's not supposed to have on him and immediately notifies school. He won't be subject to discipline if he could possess it legally off of school grounds. This doesn't apply to firearms or destructive devices. Doesn't apply to alcohol or drugs either. Oh, I was just on my way to turn it in. Doesn't matter. You can't possess it outside of the school. So all codes of conduct all over the state have little quirky things like this in them. And most of the time, the people that work there hadn't even read them. If you don't use that book every day to discipline kids and as an assistant principal in the office, most of the time you haven't even read all these little quirky things like that. This is a CMS special right here, the safe harbor provision. I don't think very many people have it, but they've got a couple of these little quirky kinds of things. Yours probably does too. You need to read them. You don't want to get transfer when criminal charges are pending triage process. If most of the time, unless you have some kind of a juvenile facility in your district where kids get housed, you won't run into this, but you might. This may be in your handbook, may not. Again, this is one of those quirky things from CMS. Disciplinary response, conduct away from school, and here are a lot of the policies on personal technology device. Here's that policy right here. You need to read that. Every district has a different one. Reporting to Department of Social Studies, reporting to motor vehicles. Did you know that you're supposed to report to motor vehicles if a kid has alcohol or illegal drugs, and that they can lose their driver's license for that? And that's why you tell the Department of Motor Vehicles. That's a state law. A lot of people don't even know that. Here are tier 1, and it gives you a range of things. Now, CMS, one of their quirky things is every one of their tiers, one of their first choice is you can choose something from the tier below. That's unusual. Most districts don't do that, but CMS has put that one in. And again, you need to know that. You need to read your code of conduct for quirky things like this. And here are all your infractions. You need to read these carefully to make sure that you know what the definitions of these things are. Probably you have, and it gives you your minimum and maximum. Hopefully the handbook for the district that you're in does that. If it's supposed to. It may be a level system rather than a tier system. You need to find out. There's a difference between level system and tier system. You need to find out what that is by talking to the administrative team at your school. There's more flexibility in the tier system than the level system is basically it. But all of your infractions are in here, but there's also some other little quirky things like you haven't seen or heard before. And so a lot of things that don't come into play every time. Notice of long-term suspension, a DTM. This takes the place of a due process hearing, a DTM. Now, if the parent doesn't agree with what comes out of DTM, then you have to do the due process hearing. This is supposed to be a shortcut or a way to cut down the number of due process hearings that you have to do. These are less formal, less binding. Purpose of this meeting is for the team to review the investigation completed by the school, the principal's recommended consequences, the due process procedures afforded, and any information to the student. There is no right for a representative counsel to attend the DTM. Again, if the DTM, if the parent rejects the DTM, you go to the hearing where you do have right for counsel. Supposedly, this expedites the due process for infractions that would take you outside for long-term suspension, expulsion, or put you into an alternative school. This is not for minor infractions. And so, but now, understanding that most districts don't do this, again, this is a CMS quirk. They hired, I think, 6 area administrators in the zones in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, and all they do is just travel around and do these DTMs, as opposed to doing due process hearings. They used to have a cadre of people that traveled around and did due process hearings. A lot of negotiation took place. There is no negotiation at a hearing. Hearing is a finding of facts. So it goes to the superintendent and you get what you get. And part of the reason why the DTM came in was to give parents more of a say-so and be more negotiable with the discipline. And if the parent didn't want to be, then you go to the hearing and you get what you get. This was an attempt at community relations, providing more procedural due process, I guess. I haven't seen the statistics in a while since I retired. I haven't seen the numbers, so I can't speak to the effectiveness of this. This was just coming in as I was going out. And so I really can't comment one way or the other whether it's worked or not. But again, most districts don't do this. They just have a due process hearing. If you've committed an infraction, that would lend itself for the recommendation of a long-term suspension, expulsion, or alternative placement. This is like an act of crime and violence, carries a 10-day suspension with it, and a secondary recommendation from the superintendent to the board beyond that. That's what we're talking about. In a large district, we would have anywhere between 2,500 and 3,000 hearings a year. The idea was to, instead of doing 2,500 to 3,000 hearings, maybe do 100 hearings and do 2,400 to 2,900 DTMs, and that would bring about a lot of community goodwill and parents feeling more supportive of schools, like they were a part of the process, because the DTM is an informal and negotiable kind of thing. The idea was if they did that, there'd be more buy-in from parents and the kids would behave better. I don't know what the numbers say, but again, this is one of those quirky things that I'm talking about that different districts do that you need to find out what yours looks like. There's some other things in here. Procedures for reentry to expel students after 365, alternative setting, all this stuff, point of exit, point of entry, keep kids from circumventing assignment to an alternative school for disciplinary purposes. You can't withdraw from a school and go somewhere to another school, and those kinds of things, procedure for expungement of records, all these things come into play, especially in secondary school. You better know all this stuff. A lot of it gets a little bit complicated, but you better make sure that you know it all. Terms, definitions, terms in school, all of these things. DPI crime definitions. there's a lot of stuff in your code of conduct that I'm sure you weren't even aware of that you're going to need to be aware of when you become an assistant principal. A lot of these things you say, well, I'm just going to be in an elementary school. You have an elementary kid bringing a gun and pop it off in school, and you're going to need to know this stuff because all of it applies then. So make sure that you understand the technical part of the job. I was hoping tonight to have some folks online with me. It just fell that we didn't. I didn't plan a lot tonight. I was hoping to have some folks talk to me about their experiences with code of conduct and what quirky things we might find in theirs. But since I don't have anybody with me tonight, that'll be fine. I see it's about 6:30, so I'm going ahead and conclude tonight. If you have any questions, we'll be back at regular time next week at 7 o'clock. If you have any questions, please make sure that you call or email. There's a place in discussion board where you can go in and do that. Make sure, as I've told you before, your discussion boards are not optional. You have to do them, but when you do them is up to you. Other than you got to keep up with your evidence artifact work because of the timeline for turning into task string, the timeline for putting it in discussion board for peer review, and then doing peer reviews for your colleagues. So if we look at the weekly schedule, I'm guessing it's going to stop, and I'm going to have to go back and do another share here. But as we look at the weekly schedule, here it comes. So here we go. So where we are is on week 5. Students write, review local student handbooks. That's, as I said, I was hoping that somebody would be able to chime in tonight, and we'd see about handbooks, code of conducts, those kinds of things. Your discussion board this week is to observe a student due process in a school and report. I had a couple of those good ones on discussion board this week. In terms of, again, all these things are at your discretion, not whether you do them or not, but when you do them, they are required. But now this column over here on the right, you need to make sure you keep up and be timely with your evidence artifact work. So this week, the skip final was due in discussion board to start peer review. 2 peer reviews of skip D are due in discussion board. That should just be 1 peer review of skip D. We'll just do 1 of all of them. What I meant by that was you need to have yours in there and you need to review somebody else's. I should have been clearer on that. Again, you're only doing 1 peer review for each component, not 2. The 2 was you put 1 in, you for review and you do review, but I should have been clearer. All right. So remember, discussion boards keep that in your mind that you're on your own to do those when you need to, but not your evidence artifact work. You got to keep up with it. It is timely. It is due every week. All right. I'll see you at 7 o'clock next week. Everybody have a good week.